The press gallery may have hoped that things would have quietened down after the rush of the election campaign, but things in Canberra are busier than ever, with leadership contests both left and right, no pun intended. Let's start though with the new look front bench, with which the Prime Minister unveiled on Monday.
I intend to recommend to the Governor-General, Her Excellency Sam Mostyn, the following makeup of the ministry to be sworn in tomorrow.
The senior leadership group remains unchanged, but what were the most significant changes?
Cabinet reshuffles are important. It's about putting the right people in the right jobs. It's about promoting renewal within the government, dealing with egos and ambitions of ministers and people who believe they should be on the front bench. It's also the way that Prime Ministers make sure that their agenda is carried out. They need help and assistance from senior people. They need to be building people up into these jobs. And it can really damage a government if the wrong person is in the wrong portfolio.
The Cabinet will be made up of Richard Marles as Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Defence, Penny Wong as Foreign Affairs Minister.
I think the most significant moves are Tanya Plibersek, the Environment Minister, being moved out of her portfolio. The same thing happened to her when Labor first was elected in 2022. She's becoming the Minister for Social Services, and she's going to be replaced by the Queensland Senator Murray Watt in the Environment portfolio. He's going to take over responsibility for these redrafted nature positive laws and for the establishment of an Environment Protection Agency, both big challenges. Significantly also, Michelle Rowland replaces Mark Dreyfus as Attorney General. Our listeners will know that Mark Dreyfus has been pushed out of Cabinet. Annika Wells moves into the Communications portfolio to replace Rowland there. And it's also significant that the National Disability Insurance Scheme is going from having a standalone Cabinet Minister to being moved into Health Minister Mark Butler's portfolio, with Jenny McAllister as the Assistant Minister for the NDIS.
This all follows a bruising weekend for Labor, the dumping of the Attorney General Mark Dreyfus and the Industry Minister Ed Hughes. Over the weekend, Ed Hughes called the Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles a, quote, factional assassin for his part in the scheme. Albanese was asked about Ed Hughes' comments on Monday. What did he say?
He looked a little bit put out at the question, and I think it shows the frustration that this has overshadowed Labor's pretty remarkable victory, which is just over a week ago now. Albanese defended the system that Labor uses, whereby the factions pick their representatives on the front bench and the Prime Minister assigns portfolios. He made the point that that system's been in place pretty much unchanged since the Rudd years. It was used widely before that as well. And I think it was a gentle reminder to people that this is the rules of the road. If you're in the Labor caucus, this is how it works. I think the challenge, though, is that there are big personalities involved here, and probably there'll still be criticism of Richard Marles, and there's still questions about why the Prime Minister chose not to intervene himself.
There have been some headlines, Tom, this week that suggest there'll be some within Labor, quote, sharpening their knives in retaliation. Does this rule a line under the factional fight that's been playing out?
I think probably not. The factional chiefs have sharpened knives ready to go at all times, in my experience. It's one of the ways that they maintain their power base, they keep people in line. I think Ed Hughes is now a minister without portfolio and free to speak, and I think we'll see him in the media a lot. He could potentially be an irritant for his former cabinet colleagues. It'll be interesting to see if Mark Dreyfus chooses to speak out. He's kept his counsel to himself so far. I think probably you'll see more of this kind of factional tension in Labor's second term. There's a huge party room now, a big caucus, and it looks like Labor's going to be in power for some years. People will want to be moving up in their careers, and if they're feeling like they're not being looked after by their faction or being held back by someone else, they might be pushy in trying to get their way.
Tom, the last time we had you on, we were talking about the bloodletting inside the Liberal Party. This morning, there'll be a leadership ballot within the Liberal Party, and the contest is between Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor and the Deputy Leader Susan Lee. What do these two leadership tickets tell us about the future direction of the Liberal Party?
It will be fascinating to see how the direction of the party is affected by who they elect leader. In one sense, they're both establishment candidates. They've both been front benchers for a long time. They were both close to Peter Dutton while he was the leader.
Australia needs a strong Liberal Party, and today I'm stepping up. I'm announcing my candidacy for the leadership of the Liberal Party. Now, this wasn't a decision I took lightly.
There is a bit of a split emerging. Angus Taylor is running on a joint ticket with Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, the Nationals senator who has defected to the Liberal Party room, with, it appears, the express intention of running for deputy. Equally, Susan Lee would be a different kind of leader. Gender is a factor. She's a moderate. She's from New South Wales.
I've listened. We got it wrong. We need to do things differently going forward, and we do need a fresh approach.
And I think her position is that it's time for a change in the party, and more interesting or perhaps less traditional choice would be better for that direction going forward.
Tom, some of this has played out in the press and there's been accusations and mudslinging. You mentioned there Jacinta Price's defection to the Liberal Party room. How has that been received by her fellow colleagues?
Well, the Nationals were pretty furious with her. She's only been in Parliament since the 2022 election, and I think the Nationals feel that they invested a lot in her and gave her prominence during the Voice to Parliament debate, and they feel a bit jilted that she's immediately packed up and gone off to the Liberals. On the other side, there's a bit of a mixed reaction. I think people close to Angus Taylor see her as a real asset. She's a great retail politician. Whatever she does, she catches headlines, and she's got real energy behind her. But equally, there are some people in the Liberals who think that the party's being taken over by the Nationals, and they're concerned that they could be electing a deputy leader who's barely been in Parliament for a term and who has only just joined the Libs in order to get on the leadership ticket. So it's a complicated one. I think, as with a lot of Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price's record, there's always heat and light around her, and people have pretty polarised views.
And that very public bloodletting that we spoke of, Tom, last week has continued through this week.
Yeah, Senator Hughes is very vocal in her criticism of Angus Taylor. She's done another round of interviews where she's accused him of preparing to mount a leadership bid before the election was held, while Peter Dutton was still the leader. She's obviously supporting Susan Lee, his rival, in this week's vote, and she's angry at being pushed out of Parliament by the factions within the Liberal Party. But it's striking that she's being so vocal and public in her criticism of Angus Taylor, and also that Angus Taylor's office felt the need to respond to Senator Hughes today and say that her accusations about pre-positioning before the election were incorrect. I think it's a real irritant for him. I think also that it could be problematic for her standing in the party room and whether it's actually helping Susan Lee or hurting her at this point. I think a lot of noses will be out of joint among Liberal MPs that this is happening in the media.
Tom, has anyone else thrown their hat in the ring? Some have floated Tim Wilson, who retook the seat of Goldstein at the election. Is that a real or live possibility?
At the time of recording, it's a live possibility. I think probably once the ballot happens, it won't be a serious proposition. He is back in Parliament after 3 years away, having beaten Zoe Daniel and Goldstein. His main public backer, at least, seems to be Jason Falinski, the former McKellar MP, who also lost his seat to a Teal. I think Tim Wilson's got a big presence in the new opposition, but I doubt it's in the leadership ticket as such. I think more likely he will have a front bench position in the shadow cabinet.
And Tom, whoever wins the Liberal leadership ballot, given the task ahead of them, is this position a bit of a poison chalice?
It's definitely a challenging one. The first opposition leader after an electoral loss, particularly a thumping like we've seen here, is very unlikely to lead the party all the way through back to government. I think the Liberals and the Nationals are facing probably at least 2 terms in opposition after already doing 1 term. So I think this leader will potentially be a long-term prospect. They will find it difficult to regroup and pull the party back together and try and put forward a strong opposition. history would suggest they're probably unlikely to win, but there have been examples of people who have won from opposition after an electoral loss, and everything that you think is certain in politics is usually challenged pretty quickly, so you've got to keep an open mind with these things.
Don't go anywhere because there'll be more full story after the break. In the meantime, if you want to support The Guardian's independent journalism, you can like and subscribe below or follow the links in the description. Okay, Tom, I want to pivot now and talk about the Greens. On Thursday, they'll be picking their new leader after Adam Bandt lost his seat of Melbourne. Who is looking likely to take the top job in the Greens, and what might their leadership mean for the party going forward, for a shrunken party?
Yeah, it is a shrunken party. They've come off a real high in 2022. They won more seats than were expected, and Adam Bandt's leadership was very strong. I think they're probably reeling from him losing his seat. I don't think many people were expecting him to lose it to Labor. That leaves the leadership vacant. It probably would have been a leadership ballot if he had have held on to the seat. The main candidates so far publicly declared seem to be Sarah Hanson-Young from South Australia, long-term senator, very well-known Greens MP, and Mehreen Faruqi, the New South Wales senator. She has been vocal in giving media interviews since she declared for the leadership. Sarah Hanson-Young's been a bit more in the background. And it's breaking a little bit along the lines that we sometimes see with the Greens. What kind of party do they want to be? Are they the traditional environmental campaign kind of party, or do they want to go more in the direction of social issues? It'll be fascinating to see what happens. The Greens often do these things quietly and behind closed doors, and my sense is that's what Sarah Hanson-Young is trying to do. Mehreen Faruqi is obviously less experienced in Parliament. She's held the education portfolio and I think has had quite a lot of prominence in that job. So it'll be interesting to see. It's a week of fascinating leadership votes here in Parliament.
The Greens lost lower house seats, but they held their numbers in the Senate, and they'll be holding the balance of power when Parliament returns in June or July. What role do you expect them to play in the new Parliament?
It will be fascinating. They will be required. Their votes will be required for Labor. So almost every piece of legislation, if the opposition is opposing it, the Greens will be the kingmakers. They'll have to give their views to the government. They'll probably have demands of their own. Certainly when we were expecting Adam Bandt to be leading the party, he was very vocal in explaining what the Greens would seek for their support for legislation. Anthony Albanese sought to avoid making a formal deal with them. Instead, it'll be a legislation by legislation kind of proposition. And we've seen in the last Parliament how effective the Greens can be at holding things up. If they're not fully on board with legislation, they're prepared to go to extremes to hold it up. That being said, some within the party, and certainly people within Labor, think that they've paid the price for that at the election that we've just had, and that Max Chandler-Mather and Adam Bandt losing their seats is in part because of the obstructionist approach that they brought on housing legislation.
Well, the makeup of Parliament, Tom, will look very different this coming year. Thanks so much for taking us through all that.
Great to be with you, Nour. Thanks.